such a delight to have you with me. And, I thought, what else can we talk to you about but the state of our cities? And
Uh,
specifically in the last a few weeks, we've had so many occurrences of flooding, of um, uh, all sorts of man-made disasters. And you've been studying heat patterns for 6 years and more now, and you've been studying how our cities are changing.
mm,
And I really wanted to talk at a little more conceptual level, in the
mhm.
sense that our cities have ceased to be. Hello?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Our cities have ceased to be for citizens. I mean, you have either these privatized, gated enclaves and communities where the elite try to sort of, distance themselves from public services until, of course, it comes right to their doorstep. And the citizens, for instance, the people, the vendors, the street dealers, they have all but vanished from our streets and from our pavements. And that worries me because I think we grew up with a certain sense of the city which seems to be dying out now. Even there's a huge campaign, for instance, that News Laundry did recently on the private encroachments of pavements. The encroachment of pavements by little extensions of gardens, for instance. In some of these colonies in Delhi, it's all a sense of the space for the public, the space for the citizens is shrinking. This was one of the ideas that I wanted to talk to you about, but there's lots more. But shall we begin with this? And really, what do you think of what's happening in terms of this idea of the space for citizens in a city?
So what I have done is you very kindly sent the questions. So I've just been focused on that. I mean, of course, other things are there in the background, and we can talk about that as well. But I thought that, so you can decide what you want, but I've just prepared.
So,
What I feel prepared is as per your questions, but other things are also welcome. It may be fun as well. Yes.
So go ahead. Let's talk about this idea of private gated communities and what's left for the rest of us.
Yeah. So, if we start with Gurugram, nearly 40%
Yes.
of residents live in informal settlements or older villages outside the gated community. And so their voices are missing until a crisis strikes. Um, you can gate the community, but you can't gate out the risk, the flood risk. And it's only when you are not able to gate risk out, you obviously falls in, and then you become aware of that risk. So what we need is institutional ward platforms where all the neighborhoods participate. And Ahmedabad has showed the way how ward committees shaped budgets, for example, for drainage, waste, roads, toilets for women, for example, such as the work of Mahila Housing Trust has shown. So it's possible. It's an example, but it's possible to do that at a ward level. And the private interest cannot create public conveniences, such as flood management. So losses may be private, but loss reduction and the risk reduction, it has to be public. You can't. So that's the institutional ward platform is one. The third is my idea of citizen participation. And that must be part of everyday services like waste segregation, rainwater harvesting. There are a lot of efforts done. Heat alerts, not just protest or not just but to participation in the monitoring of what is planned, in evaluating what is actually performance has been of that plan. And again, of course, the replanning. So this citizen participation as a consultation, when we start things and then completely forgetting about them, that is something we need to change. So we can't leave our risk for others to reduce. It's just not possible. So we have to be involved. And so our vision for our infrastructure can go far beyond its existing state. Are we building infrastructure of the past for solutions for the future? And that's something I feel as an urban planner greatly concerned, that maybe we need to think more about our infrastructure investment and see that are we by mistake, oversight, building infrastructure of the past, and not only in terms of technology, and not only in terms of design and coverage, in terms of population or geographic area, but also in terms of conception, that what would infrastructure of 2040 would be like. And I was searching for such a possible document or an article, and there isn't one. And for a country of our size and with a variety of people and both analytical, critical, artistic, to not have even one piece which talks about infrastructure 2040, what would it be like? It's something striking, especially since the Rakesh Mohan Committee report, I think almost 20 years ago, when I think he was at NC, Council of Economic Research, which said about what happens to India's infrastructure and what should happen. So I think that's I feel very strongly. To sum up, one is you can't gate out the risk. You can gate out other people. You can't have risk reduction private. It has to be public effort, everybody. And third idea that we need to go beyond consultation and planning to actually monitoring that. Yeah.
Excellent. That's a great start. The idea of citizens' participation and private players. This is something that the Urban Challenge Fund is mooting. It's saying that 25% of the funding can come from the government. The rest should be raised by private players or by citizens through this challenge. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah. So, not the opinion. I think there are sort of various ways I'd like to address this. One is the need for Urban Challenge Fund, and it's a very good idea, and I'll come to that. But before that, there is a limit to how much Urban Challenge Fund we can put in as a country or as a private sector as well. So first is that whatever money we are spending for this purpose, the risk reduction, infrastructure project, are we spending it more effectively? And that's something I think there is a tremendous scope of having far more impact for the same amount of rupees spent on urban challenges, including infrastructure. So that's sort of one way we need to talk about both urban planning but urban risk reduction as well. That how the same rupee which is spent in urban budget will have more impact. So that's one. Second is that a lot of urban risk reduction, urban planning, urban development is being done by the private sector, and by private sector, not only large corporations and businesses and contractors, which they do, and they do very good, but very small individual family businesses which are making, they are private, they are much larger in number in any city. They are also much larger in the actual amount of the money that is being informally, that is being indirectly spent into urban development, urban risk reduction. So how do we better organize that effort? It has far more impact. To give you an example, that if a small business selling fruits at the corner of your residential area is making platform to raise his fruit selling carts space to avoid flooding, that's an investment that he's making in the. Now, how that actually adds up to the area-related or flood water drainage to that. So that's a large amount. There is no quantification done, but our estimates suggest that almost 50 to 65% of money private individuals who are not rich are spending on managing their urban development, managing their urban risk, and we need to find a better framework for them to be more effective. And third is the Urban Challenge Fund, and that's a very good idea. And there are three areas there which concerns me very much. One is the citizens' participation must be more formalized through ward sabhas, through small business committees, for residential welfare associations, so they influence budgets and planning both. So that's one concern for Urban Challenge Fund. The second is that it's not concern, it's a way ahead. The second way ahead to make them even more effective, both in design and performance, is to have private players must be partners and not just contractors. And how do you do that? You don't want the private sector to take over, which is a public good. At the same time, you don't want them to also reduce themselves to look at what the profit is. So how do you increase the public spirit of the private sector? And it's possible, of course, we have a history of it in our country. So with 70% of urban infrastructure involving PPPs, and contracts should embed citizen priorities like water, conservation, heat resilience, a whole range of cooling measures. So that's the second part to Urban Challenge Fund. And third way ahead is that it can work if it supports not only corporates, but also small enterprises, women's groups, small businesses, transportation initiatives. For example, Ahmedabad's heat action plan showed that by engaging hospitals, NGOs, communities together, the impact of heat action plans was, multiplied. So how will it be mainstream in municipal budgets, for example, the Urban Challenge Fund? Converge during the crisis or collaborate with those who are left out, and who will actively synthesize different elements or approaches to create something cohesive from the Urban Challenge Fund. So that's the way ahead. We should be thinking and planning before we have more Urban Challenge Funds, or before we increase the size of Urban Challenge Funds. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking now, recently we had Greater Bangalore Authority being formulated, and the idea of dividing it into 5 municipal corporations, that seems to be a landmark legislation. How do you feel it will work? And does it work as a model for big cities? Or do we wait for that to happen? Or should we try that out in other cities and not wait to see the implications or the results of it in Bangalore?
Yeah. I need to know more to answer it more clearly and more confidently. But what I do know of that as a public citizen, we all need to know more about the Greater Bangalore Authority and its ways of working and challenges and the way ahead that they are planning. And the way to do that, for me, the future I see from what I know, and I said it's not adequate, it's limited, but it shows the promise because it brings integration across agencies. Water, transport, drainage, for example, that usually work in silos in most of our cities, in most of the time. There are exceptions, but now is the time to further define and refine this integration in terms of who and what and why and how of this Bangalore model. The second part of this model, which is very interesting and I'd like to know more, is the requirement for annual performance reporting. That is now third-party performance reporting, prominently involving other cities such as Gurugram, for example, Chennai from Tamil Nadu, Itanagar from Nagaland, for example, so that in doing the third-party review, these other cities also pick up things which are useful and are able to share what they think would improve the performance. So this city to city learning and doing together will not only improve the performance of the particular authority or authorities around that, but will also make our democratic bodies at a lower level function far more in a federative manner, in a collaborative manner, than they themselves working in the silos of democracy. So that's the second part of this model and the promise. And the third and the last, not last, but third, is that without citizen oversight at the ward level, it's risk becoming another top-heavy body. So integration at the top must be matched by participation at the bottom, but also integration at the bottom must be matched by participation at the top. And how do you do that? So it has to be far more cohesive, far more compact, so that vertical integration takes place, horizontal integration takes place, so that demand side and supply side integration takes place, and so that program and system integration takes place as well. Otherwise, we'll have a somewhat scattered and skewed integration taking place if we remove the silos, but sort of silos don't really integrate. They lean to each other or touch to each other, but really don't perform the way they should be performing. So that's the promise of the Greater Bangalore Authority. And I really wish they would, I'm sure they are so busy with that, but they would involve other cities and other people into what they are doing so that it becomes much wider. Thank you.
Yes, I think so. The other question really that comes to mind because of the work that you have done in particular is the heat patterns. And, it occurred to me the people who work outside on the streets, the vendors, the laborers, how does a city provide shelter for them? How does a city become, not be so such a not come in the way of their work? How does a city do that? I think that really makes me think about what your suggestions would be for that.
Our Indian cities are so wonderful, and like most Indian things, they are they have multiple personalities, and one of the prominent personality our cities have is hope. And so everybody wants to go to the city and everybody wants to make it, and that's wonderful, and that must continue. But they also have a personality which is of cities of catastrophe, and almost anything can go wrong anytime to anybody, and that's possible. There's nothing that is guaranteed. This sort of tremendous uncertainty of urban living which keeps on multiplying. And that is something which plays out rather depressingly in the extreme heat kind of a situation. So our work shows that in Ahmedabad, for example, vendors' incomes fell 20 to 25% on extreme heat days due to lost customers and illness and related delays, for example. And planning can do more to reduce these losses to zero. It's possible to reduce the losses, definitely. And if we really try, extreme heat death is avoidable. It's, other deaths are not. But this extreme heat deaths are definitely avoidable. And we don't do that. So
don't plan for that at all.
We don't do enough. There is a national effort, there is a state effort, city effort, but we need to do even more than what we have done. And I fully recognize the work that various cities and states have done on heat action planning, the recent effort to review that at a large scale by civil society organizations, and a lot of civil society organizations and governments very actively making the second generation of plans. So that is one. The second is working conditions remain harsh. So construction workers, especially sanitation staff, rickshaw pullers, for example, they face long hours in direct heat without shade, water, or rest or break. And it's whether heat or not, first of all, that is a very difficult working condition, decency of work is not protected there. And then extreme heat just multiplies it many times. And that is something, in my mind, needs sort of double effort. On one hand, to improve the way we treat our workforce, we treat our work itself, and find ways of making it more decent, more doable, more comfortable. At the same time, have extreme heat-related measures focus on people who are affected the most to do that. Let me give you an example. Here in Ahmedabad, we are working with transportation workers, and there was a long list that we were able to make with them, that what are the measures which will help them reduce the impact of extreme heat in 2025 summer. And then we sat with them and said, what is just one single most important measure, which is the least costly, but most has most impact possible. And that turned out to be, of course, to your surprise, was drinking water. That if you drink adequate water during those times, and as you are less likely to be affected. And the Transportation Authority was very kind to put in coolers at the bus terminus, 6 or 7 of them. And we were able to, as an experiment, we are not a charity, to see that if each of them had 2,200 had a water bottle and regular reminder during the 8 hours of work to drink 2 liters of water, what will happen. And having done that with some mistakes, some overlaps, all this included, but still, when we finished and when summer was gone and first rains came, we had 2 focus group meetings, not a full survey yet. And what we found was that their absenteeism because of extreme heat was reduced to half. Just one, drinking water, one effort.
And that's measure.
Exactly. And their income loss that they would suffer because they wouldn't turn up to work and they would miss their salary or whatever contractual amount that they've been. And that came down to, again, 1/3 loss on that side. So I think the point for us, but for us wasn't for us, is that a lot of extreme heat-related measures are not necessarily very expensive, very top-down, very complicated. Actually, they are quite simple and small, but you need to do action at a large scale, and you all need to agree that this is what needs to be done. It's basically food, it's water, it's shelter, it's how you work, where you work, when you work, and I suppose that's all. But somehow, we need to focus more on that than we have done so far. So all these excellent heat action plans will, have far more impact than they've had so far.
Wonderful. It's as you said, cities are little containers of hope. This gives me a lot of hope as well, that small measures like that can make such a difference to people's lives. We see Uber drivers, we see motorcycle riders, carrying our food, our supplies, and they really have no way of sheltering themselves from the sun. Which brings me to this other idea, the whole city as a source of business as well, the streets being a source of business, the vendors, the fruit sellers, the chaat walas, whatever. Traditionally, that really has been their business, but increasingly we find them being removed or, sort of rehoused elsewhere. What do you think? How do you think we need to handle that?
First of all, I think after independence, we had very good idea about Indian cities, of independent India cities, and a lot of work was done. Some as famous as people, Prabhu's and of course all the new towns, starting from Bhubaneswar to Gandhinagar in Ahmedabad, near Ahmedabad, they came up. And a lot of the private planning, for example, Jabala and Associates in Delhi had more than 400 colonies planned. So a lot of planning, Indian way of planning came, and which was by and large in in harmony with nature, in harmony with what the resources have, keeping very much in mind that people don't have money and they need to find a way to have their housing, shelter, etc. And somewhere we got perhaps a bit carried away into always sort of more same thing than losing out on the diversity, one. And second, losing out on the plurality of doing things, the diversity of the citizens and plurality of planning, which somehow we started missing out. And we also forgot that, not entirely, but we forgot that there is no reason why we cannot be more creative, more innovative as people. We are, and we should exercise that more. So the cultural and social vibrancy shouldn't be lost in terms of 40% of evictions and zoning restrictions affecting people. Imagine a city run with only one retail chain selling one thing in the same way throughout the city. So people that we think, businesses that we think, activities that we think is hindrance to our way of living is actually bringing real life to us. And we don't want to clean it up and get rid of that and sanitize. Also, if we take street vendors, but small businesses, construction labor, even migrants, for example, and we see them as a burden that a city has to provide for, but actually they are the resilience actors. So they, without any support from us as a relatively well-to-do citizens, or the state or the municipal authority, they take measures to survive and be resilient. And if they didn't be resilient, they won't be there, they would be dead. So for them, the motivation to be resilient, to adapt and mitigate is far more, and they are doing it. So there is no study to show that what is the quantum of what they are doing and what is the money amount that it actually contributes. But our estimate shows that up to 30% of loss and damage that is replenished is by their own resources. It's hard work, skipping the meal, redoing your work at night instead of day, etc. So if 30% of the budget of extreme heat, for example, is being subsidized by people who are most affected, the rest of the people obviously need to do far more than we have done so far. And I think, there is a very good way ahead, if I may suggest, which solves several problems without any additional measures that we need to take. And that is the Street Vendors Act of 2014. It already offers protection and vending zones. I know there is weak implementation, not full implementation. It sort of threatens the way of life. But let us make that act most of it. It just promises so much, it's so useful, and it can be used in so many ways and lead our cities in India, cities in South Asia, offer protection against extreme heat and floods. So we need to look at that act not only for employment and zoning, which it is very much so, but it offers far more creativity, innovation, which we can use with the act. Otherwise, we said we will need some new act for heat action planning, we'll need some new rules, regulations. But what we have, this is very useful. It has come out of a long struggle of thousands of workers. So let us make more use of that to protect against extreme heat, but also against other extremes such as floods and cyclones. Yeah.
Absolutely. Which brings me to the last question. We also are running out of time, unfortunately. The top 3 issues that you feel urban planners need to tackle right away.
So I think climate resilience, 1, equity and inclusion, 2, or justice, and finance and accountability. Let me go a bit in detail. With 60% of GDP generated in cities, floods, heat, and air pollution directly affect health and livelihoods that we know. But cities also directly and indirectly destroy nature. So how can cities restore nature? Not just give us house to live and income to make, but can we have cities which also restore nature? And we have examples of those efforts done individually and collectively. We just need to consolidate and move ahead of that. The idea is as old as the garden city, but there is a lot done that. On equity and inclusion part is the inclusion of migrants, for example. It was so terrible to see not thousands, millions of migrants going back from cities to their hometown for safety. If you can't even offer them safety in a city, what's the point? So how can Indian cities also lead in being engines to provide climate justice, humanitarian justice, cities that bring just way of living? So that's the second thought, very much reverberating. And third is finance. And again, there is this idea of how will we finance. There is a gap of 100+ billion annual financing gap, which has been worked out by various studies. But I think what we miss out is the transparent use, more effective, better use of funds and the citizens' oversight. So same rupee, as I said before, making far more bank than they have made so far. Second is again the contribution of citizens themselves to financing cities and their functioning in various small, not so small ways. We need to augment that and give them leverage to be far more effective. For example, our estimates are that up to 60% of extreme heat cooling measures come from citizens in their own indirect and informal ways. So not to control these individual efforts, but how do we facilitate, enhance, and link them up so there is a larger impact, financial impact, than they being lost in various directions, various efforts being done. So I think that is the three things: climate equity and finance.
So much. It's really been like a masterclass in urban planning and urban thinking. Thank you for your time, Mihir, and I hope we can do this again sometime, focusing on particular services, perhaps looking at the idea of the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, or looking at the water and sanitation department. So perhaps we can go more granular next time. But thank you very much for your thoughts, and they're all really most useful. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was the idea of the infrastructure map for 2040. The fact that we haven't even thought about that, apart from the other points you made. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for inviting, and all that I've presented or talked about is something I've learned from various Indian cities. So we should be thankful to those cities to offering. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.